Then there's California, a podcast featuring members of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus in conversation about their lives, their legislative priorities, their opinions, and perspectives that help make California exceptional. From the state capitol in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green. Many youth who move through and then transition out of the foster care system have already lived through multiple traumas and disruptive events by the time they begin their transition to adulthood, including abuse and neglect, a possible handful of foster home and adoption placements, and an early initiation to lost or disconnected relationships. And of course, disadvantages early in the life of foster youth can set the stage for difficulties that impact the emotional and social development of those youth as they grow up, in particular, causing disruptions and continuity with their ongoing education. Reports and stats from the last few years show that California's foster youth do fare slightly better than the national average when it comes to graduating from high school and finding a job. And recent efforts in California are further helping those young people emancipate, as they say, and succeed in applying for and starting college. But mental health challenges and housing insecurity, and especially the financial roadblocks, often stymie the higher education hopes of those youth, making it difficult in their plans for starting and staying in college and graduating. But a piece of, I dare say, historic and potentially life-changing legislation signed into law last year is poised to go a long way in addressing college accessibility and affordability issues for this often overlooked foster youth population, further opening the college and university doors and allowing those youth to pursue a degree or a certificate for free. And on this episode of Then There's California, we'll share a conversation about the challenges and barriers facing former foster youth and their aspirations for higher education, and hear details about the College for Foster Youth Act from 2023 that is destined to make those higher education aspirations more of a reality. State Senator Angelique Ashby is one of the principal co-authors of the College for Foster Youth Act. Senator Ashby represents California's 8th Senate District, including the city of Sacramento and parts of Sacramento County. And prior to being elected to the Senate in 2022, Senator Ashby was a Sacramento City Council member for more than a decade and also served as vice mayor. And for a large part of her city council term, she was the only woman member of the council. Her compelling personal story of being a single mom, barely out of her teens, and getting her undergrad degree and a law degree here in Northern California while raising her son and living on public assistance and subsidized housing has been an inspiration to many and, of course, informs her multiple policy priorities. Senator Ashby most recently joined us on this podcast in the spring of last year with Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg in a robust and compelling conversation about the problem of poverty. We don't have a book this time for you to read, but we're always glad to have you back. Senator Ashby, welcome.
This homework assignment was a little harder than just that book.
Yes, absolutely. It took some legislation.
Yeah, it took some legislation.
But well done on that. We'll talk about that. And it is also a privilege to have joining us Cody Van Felden of Sacramento. Cody is a former foster youth and since 2020 has been one of several advocates with John Burton Advocates for Youth, or JBAY as it's called, focusing on issues related to reproductive health, access to public benefits, and taxes. Cody is a mom to a little girl and, meanwhile, is currently a student at Sacramento State University, set to graduate with her bachelor's in psychology in May of this year. Cody's personal story is compelling and inspiring and is obviously the catalyst for her passion in working with young people and using her professional and personal experiences to close the gaps in the system faced by our most vulnerable youth. Cody, nice to have you with us. Welcome.
Absolutely. I am just thrilled to be here to be able to close all of those gaps for youth like me.
And congratulations on an upcoming graduation. Did your dream come true?
Yep. 9 years, almost a decade in college, and I am set to graduate on May 17th.
That's fantastic. Well, Senator, Happy New Year. And how's the year been so far? You kind of hit the ground running with budget deficit and everything else you could have in the second part of a 2-year term. How's it going?
So far, so good. I survived my first year, kept my head above water. So I'm going into the second year excited for what is to come.
As we talked about, you bring a lot of policy priorities here to the legislature that have been part of your life, part of your work in politics here locally. Talk a little bit about that and making those personal priorities legislative and policy priorities.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I come from the local government, and some people have different pathways to the Senate or to the legislature, and some folks do come through the county or through legislation experiences here as staff or in some way involved with legislation, and I am not one of them. However, this particular topic for me is very personal. I am not a former foster youth, and neither is my father, but my father is the former head of foster care for the state of California. And he died in 2020. I was really close to my dad. We owned a consulting firm at one point and did a lot of work around foster youth, particularly around aged out foster youth like Cody, and how to help them be successful. My dad was the child welfare director in San Diego County for many years, and this was his passion. He was raised in a foster home, but not as a foster youth. My grandma, she's the sweetest person in the world. She opened her home to foster youth. She had 2 sons, so I love to tell this story. All of my foster relatives or adopted relatives are women because my grandmother said, I have 2 boys, send me all the girls and I will take them in. And so I have these beautiful aunts in my life who came through the foster care system. And my dad loved his sisters, and that led to his career, which led to a passion in me. So this bill was the idea I came through the door with. This is what I wanted to do. And when I ran for office and people asked me, what do you want to do? This was generally my answer. I don't think that foster youth should have to look for money for school. It's hard enough for them to qualify for school academically. It is hard enough facing the odds that are stacked against them as young people to just get themselves in a position where academically it is an opportunity for them. If they can get there, the least we can do as the state of California is meet them with the resources they need. So I wrote SB 307. And the idea behind SB 307 is if you're a former foster youth and you're in the state of California, there should be no financial barrier to your success in college. It includes housing, books, tuition, whatever you would need.
Which is in itself extraordinary in the sense that you're covering, scholarships are great, but there's those basic human daily needs, housing being one of the key elements of it. And to have that covered is an element of security that most students, not to mention former foster youth, are able to have.
To be a foster youth is to be housing insecure. These are synonymous terms. And so if you tell a young person like Cody, who's in survival mode, that they have to choose between their education and making enough money to not be housing insecure, you have given them a Sophie's choice. And obviously, they have to choose to keep a roof over their heads. We know that there's an extraordinary number of homeless individuals who identify as former foster youth, about 50%. We also know that when you ask foster youth in high school, would you like to go to college? An astronomically high 95% or so say yes. But what we also know is that it is an extremely small percentage of them who actually do. And so this bill seeks to reverse that outcome and instead say to foster youth, when they are young, I know there is so much in your life outside of your control right now. You don't know where you're going to live. You don't even know where you're going to go to school next year. But if every day you show up for yourself academically and you get yourself in a position where you can go to college, even junior college, the state of California will be there to meet you. It's a game changer. And I'm very proud to have authored it. Honestly, if I did nothing else, and this was the top of the pyramid for me, it would be enough because it is what I came here to do. But I'm very proud of my colleagues. My co-author is Senator McGuire, who very generously allowed me to lead on the bill. Jay Bay had to settle for a freshman instead of the majority leader, but they were gracious too. And I think it doesn't take long after meeting me and talking to me about this bill to understand that I was going to blow through whatever wall I needed to blow through to make it happen. I was prepared to work on this for a few years. So I'm grateful that we were able to get it into the budget. I'm grateful to the governor, to our budget chair, Nancy Skinner, to the subcommittee leader, Senator Laird. Every one of them signed on. Our appropriations chair, they all agreed that this was a top priority. And for that, the Codys of the world have a real shot.
Talk about that, Cody. Does this mean a real shot for the average former foster youth that are considering college?
It does mean a shot. And at least for me personally, she's our champion. And we've got several champions in the state Senate and Assembly that has changed our lives. For me, it was a tremendous struggle trying to get through school. I started at community college and I failed a lot of classes trying to recover from my trauma at 18, going straight into college, being homeless in and out for 4 years through almost my entire community college journey, and then transferring to Sac State. It's going to change these kids' life, because I know if I had access to this bill, it would have changed my life and would have put me in even a better situation than I am in right now.
Well, and I appreciate the fact that this bill does not particularly benefit you directly here in the autumn of your college career, but at the same time, you're there as an advocate to spread the word to other foster youth.
Absolutely. And any of the foster youth that I come in contact with, I'm always sharing resources, especially with higher education, on what they have access to go and get it. Because every year there's new policies that are happening. And with SB 307, I try to get these kids to get access to everything that they can, because I was one of those kids that fell through the crack, and I don't want to see any more kids fall through the cracks.
Let's talk about your story, primarily in the context of telling people how important a bill like this can be to the life of a former foster youth. I know you had said somewhere that your young life was chaotic.
Yeah, so I was in and out of the foster care system when I was born to age 4. My biological parents both were using substances, and when I was 4 years old, I was adopted, and it was very chaotic. There was a lot of emotional abuse that had gone on in the home, and I was often told I wasn't going to go anywhere in life, and I wasn't taught how to be an adult. I wasn't prepared to be an adult when I turned 18. And unfortunately, when I turned 16, my adoptive parents kicked me out, and I was put in an emergency placement hold with a new family that I had just met. And they too kicked me out when I was 18. And it was hard, because I thought they genuinely cared about me, that they took me in out of the goodness of their heart, and found out it was really about the money. And that hit me really hard when I turned 18 too. I kept kind of asking why I keep having all of these parents, these people that are supposed to take care of me, but then they kick me out and they leave me with nothing. And because CPS handled my case inappropriately, when I turned 18, I was ineligible for all of the services that foster youth have access to.
Wow.
At one point, things did get physical. That was what resulted me in being removed from the home. And it was hard, because I was labeled as the kid who was making it up, being overdramatic or the troubled teen. And I tried to keep my head down and do good in school and follow all the rules. And that just wasn't what people were telling me I was. I was labeled with I'm going to be like my parents and get into drugs and get pregnant at 16, just all of those negative stigmas that are attached to being a foster youth. Even though I was adopted and removed from the system, those were the messages I was still getting. And I self-internalized all of those messages and had assumed I was not going to go anywhere in life. And then I got into college, and it was life-changing, because I had gotten connected to my Guardian Scholars program. And that was like my first family that I got connected to that changed the course of my life.
And Senator, I'm sure as unique as Cody's story is to her, it's not a unique story for many foster youth.
It's not. You know, the truth is that the system is very broken, and the young people who are trying to make their way through it don't have any tools or resources to be successful in that regard on their own. You hear her talk about trauma at age 4. Think about that. She has no ability to address that at 4 years old. And then, you know, when she does get a little bit of stability, it's all uprooted in her teen years. Teenagers are difficult to deal with in the best of circumstances. But she, you know, was told it was her fault, and she's not unique in that regard. These kids get labeled, they get dismissed. And I think what's really important about this piece of legislation and its implementation is that it gives people like Cody agency. It gives them control over themselves. In a world where she didn't have any control until she got to 18, and then when she was 18, she was given all the control and no resources. This is the opposite of that. It reaches in much earlier and says, you're in control. You're in the driver's seat. This is up to you. And then matches that promise with resources the day they get themselves into college. And I think that's really, really important.
To your earlier point, too, I was indeed pleasantly surprised to see, wow, how fast this bill moved. There wasn't a lot of amendment, a lot of debate, a lot of financial worries. I mean, financial elements are a key part of this. The governor made allowances for it in this year's fiscal budget. I know we have a real budget problem this year. Are you anticipating that we're good for this next year?
Yes.
For this? Okay.
I am anticipating that we are good. There's a lot of work that happened off of the ledge floor to make sure that this remained a priority. John Burton is a formidable advocate. And this was
former Senate leader, a former assembly member.
Yes.
The Burton family is a dynasty of politics here in California.
It was a very important priority to Governor Newsom when we took it to his team. So the stars aligned for this bill. And what I hope Cody and other foster youth and former foster youth hear when they hear that is that the legislature in the state of California is pulling for them. That of all the priorities out there, of all the things happening, right? Housing issues and homeless issues and poverty issues and all the things happening, that these kids that had such a tough start are a high priority to their governor, to their senators, to their assembly members. We really want to help them. And this, I think, is one major way to do that.
Cody, I opened up with a praise of sorts to California's statistics and California's records, better than the national average in terms of helping foster youth transition to adulthood, starting with education. You've lived this. Do you see that California is a better place to be as a former foster youth compared to other states?
Absolutely. I've been partnered with other organizations, and I've been connected with some youth across the state that are former foster youth. And it was last year when I really learned that there are states that don't have foster programs, period. And to me, that is just mind blowing. It's a national problem with how many kids we've got in the system that are needing the support and the services. And there are states that aren't prioritizing those kids, but California is. They are prioritizing us. And also seeing, like we talked earlier about President at Sac State, President Wood is a former foster youth. Seeing people like that, people like me, where they started out where I was in positions of power, it gives me hope, and I hope gives other kids hope that we can get there. With the right resources, the right help, we can get to those positions. And we started as kids. We are the future of California. Right. So to see California investing in these kids, you're investing in California's future, not just the kids themselves.
Senator, from your perspective, has California been a champion as best as it can be for foster youth compared to other states?
Yes. In fact, this particular bill received national praise. We heard a lot. Our communications team got a lot of feedback across the entire country. I'd like to see it modeled. I'd love to see a federal legislator pick this bill up and make it a federal priority for kids across the entire United States of America to be met with those resources when they get to college. I think it would be a game changer for so many young people.
It reminds us, I think, for all of the emotional and social struggles and challenges that face coming-of-age foster youth, the financial element is really the key barrier, and housing, and we'll talk about that in a moment too, but really financial is the struggle.
It's about stability.
Yeah.
It's about having an assurance. I was not a foster youth in college, but I was a single mom, just like Cody. And there were many times that I had to prioritize the safety or security of my son, meaning, I used food stamps. I lived in low-income housing. I had subsidized childcare. These are deep realities for former foster youth, for single moms, for people who are struggling to get that bearing, to get that base so that they can come and meaningfully contribute in our society. We have two choices: help them or don't. Either way, they're going to move through that space and time. If we help, We're creating an entire army of young, bright, educated, prepared minds. The experiences that Cody's had in her life are going to make her a far superior manager and coworker and leader and supervisor to people who have not faced any struggle or challenge in their life. Do you know how much more patience she will have than most people? Do you know the difficulty of relationships she's already sorted her way through in this life? We have a funny generation in her age in the sense that they really don't like confrontation. They don't like to talk to anybody. That was not an option for her. She's had to deal with all kinds of confrontation before she even got out of high school. You know how much that will help her in the work world? Imagine her as a lawyer or as a senator or a principal at a school or a teacher. There is very little that anybody is going to be able to bring to her that's going to be more difficult than the conversation she's already had in her young life. So if we help her with her education and her resources and her stability, we are literally growing our own strong leaders for tomorrow.
Do you feel fearless, Cody, in that sense? In a way that you shouldn't have had to be in this life of yours up till now, but do you feel that?
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. And it definitely resonates with Senator Ashby is saying of just having that power and feeling like a leadership, because I even hear it in my own life now. And I do have a lot of patience now than I even had when I was a kid. And it's all of those life experiences that really made me who I am and made this my mission in life to help all of these kids because, and I firmly believe this, that everything happens for a reason. And it was hard to kind of come to terms with that for a lot of my life, especially when I was younger. But
sure,
that was one of those things that I try to hold on to of this has to be for a reason. This can't just be the life that I live for no reason.
Well, I can give you 900 reasons why Cody lived through what she lived through, because in the first 4 months of SB 307 being in the budget, that's how many people signed up for the program. Yeah.
Wow.
900.
That's incredible.
900 reasons why she survived what she survived.
The financial issues, as I talked about with the senator, I want to get your comment on that too, and particularly also related to housing. It sounds like housing is really one of the key barriers in addition to just overall financial issues. And I know of all things, housing security or insecurity, as it were, is really something you have faced through most of your life.
Absolutely.
And still faces college students.
Because I know when I was in community college, I was in and out of homelessness for the first 4 years that I was attending Consumnes River College. And I didn't get as much financial aid then as I was getting at a state university. And having that, I had the freedom to, this is my money, I can spend it on what I need. But housing was so expensive that I didn't have enough aid to even support housing. And my life turned more into I had to couch hop and find places to sleep, which made me have to prioritize toxic relationships with people who would let me sleep on their couch for X amount of time.
To put up and deal with things you wouldn't have otherwise, but you just need a place to sleep at night.
Exactly. And I was forced to focus on that instead of doing my homework or even making friends with school. And I mean, it just... I was failing my classes and some of my teachers weren't tolerating it and I had to share them. And even being homeless, like it adds extra traumas. I mean, I know through my experience, I was assaulted in the middle of being homeless and some of my teachers were putting up a fight with me on extending due dates. Thankfully, not all of my teachers were like that, but it's just, it adds so many more traumas. So instead of being stable and housed and having the space to recover from my trauma, I'm now adding more trauma and experiencing more and more and more, which is extending everything, whether that's in school or unstable housing, recovering from the trauma. It's stability is like the biggest concern. And that's why a lot of my work with J-Bay has been homelessness.
You can't operate from a place of living in an emergency situation forever. You can only be in fight or flight for so long.
Right.
So if you're in a panicked state, how do you go sit down in an economics course, take notes, listen to a professor drone on, and then go study? You're literally the adrenaline running through your body, telling your brain, we have to do something, is going to prevent you from even being able to just sit in that chair. It's not a reasonable ask.
And that fear and that impulse is part of your life too, right? Or was,
well,
right?
It is when you have poverty and when you're responsible for other people and little people, right? Little people that you're worried about. And childcare is ridiculously expensive and hard. And the number of former foster youth who end up being parents very young is very high. That is a very high number, as Cody can tell you. And it's just, what I love about this bill is that it also includes community college. So young people who are in community college that are needing help with housing or books or stability can also seek these resources. I think that's really important. Both of us, our journey started in community college. And I think for a lot of people, it's going to start in community college. And the state of California has already done something wonderful, which is make the first 2 years of community college free for everybody. Everybody gets that. The more we do to support those early goals for young people transitioning in their lives, the better off we are down the road. This is a way of going upstream on problems and trying to fix them at their root. It's a game changer for the state of California and for all the people who are living here.
Cody, notwithstanding the security that you have in your life right now, is the fear of housing still in your soul?
Yeah. Oh, yes. That's been the hardest journey because of all the trauma that I have experienced, I got very good at being in survival mode. I could be kicked out one day and within a couple hours find a place to stay. I got talented with that. And now it's a struggle of letting that go to where I don't have to be in survival mode, because I don't want to teach my daughter that when she doesn't have to be in survival mode. And it's hard to let that go because it's a skill that I've been able to manage and get better at over the years. And now it's also kind of helped in even helping youth like myself and getting them back into extended foster care or getting them these services. I'm good at it. But the fear of losing our house, and it does scare me, because from all of my experiences, I have to have a backup plan. And it sucks that I experience that feeling still at 26, where I always have to have a backup plan. And I want the state of California to be a place where these kids do not have to always have a backup plan.
Right.
You see her actively working to break those cycles of poverty and insecurity and anxiety. She's trying so hard to prevent her daughter from needing those same tools. And I'm really proud of her.
That's nice to hear. We talk about getting the money for college, the kids get into college. One of the challenges I know have out there is what they've called the persistence issue, helping them stay in school. What furthermore can be done to give students that comfortable, secure path, hopefully with funding, but to stay in school and graduate? Most of them aren't, like Cody, aren't going to be out in 4 years. It may take a lot longer.
Most people don't graduate in 4 years.
Yeah, right.
We're not putting that on young people anymore. That's ridiculous.
But statistically, a lot of foster students have
longer.
a very choppy road through it.
Of course, it took me a long time too. It just goes, Cody's in a program called Guardian Scholars, which is something that California had already created on several campuses. Not every campus has it. UC Davis has it here locally, and Sac State has it. And there are some colleges in Southern California that have it as well. It's a wonderful program. It's a more holistic approach. And you heard her talk about the Guardian Scholars folks as family. Guardian Scholars is one of a few programs that exists on campuses that identifies students like Cody who need additional resources and supports. That may look like a counselor telling her, okay, that's probably enough extracurricular activities for you. You don't need to be president of 7 clubs. You probably need to focus more on your classes. Or I know you love advocating for foster youth, but we're going to narrow that down to one thing in your schedule. And then we're going to make sure you have time to work and bring in your income that you need. And let's help you sort out childcare. A Guardian Scholars program is attached to people. And people whose sole existence on that campus is to help the Codys of the world navigate everything that's happening. Those programs are critically important. It is not easy for any young person to navigate being on their own for the first time in their life and going to college and figuring out classes. It's so normal for freshmen to get bad grades. It's so normal for freshmen
Thank you
to
for saying that.
flunk a class. It's so normal. But when you're a foster youth and you're teetering on the edge and you have to hold on to those dollars and you have to hold on to those programs that you think may be pulled out from underneath you if you can't get the grades you're supposed to get or carry the number of units you're supposed to carry, it becomes a life and death type situation. If I lose all of this, I'm going to lose everything. If my son fails a class, the worst he gets is a lecture from me about wasting money on a class that he should have tried harder in. But for somebody who's completely reliant on that same system for their housing, for their food, for their computer, for their daughter, it becomes a lot of pressure. And so we need people to intervene. We need people on those campuses who come in and go, it's okay, she got a D. Who cares? She can repeat that class next quarter. Give her a break. She's got a lot on her plate. That requires human intervention.
Yes.
We can't just set policies in place. We need people.
And that's exactly correct. Because when I was in community college, I had to do 2 appeal processes because I wasn't making the grades. And I almost lost financial aid. And that was the money that was letting me go order McChickens at McDonald's so I could eat every day.
Right.
So, I mean, it was a life and death situation because I didn't have the skills or the confidence to even get a job. And with all of my mental health struggles at the time, I had tried to get jobs on campus and I would get physically sick just because of all of the struggles and everything that was on my shoulders. Because even as a foster youth, your first job is not just a job. It determines if you're going to succeed, and it can cripple foster youth. It almost did for me. But yeah, it's a scary place.
To the senator's point, are you starting to see more and more as you matriculate through college? You mentioned the president of Sac State being a former foster youth. Are you seeing more and more people in places of to help and not to question and not to be suspicious and give the benefit of the doubt to young people, whether it's counselors or social workers, professors, whatever it might be?
Oh, yes. Especially knowing someone in the state assembly or senate where she herself is a former foster youth. And
Senator Aisha Wahab.
Senator Wahab, yes.
And
also Assemblymember Isaac Bryant.
And that, when I heard that for the first time, was just incredible, of like seeing these people in power. And even for me, being around people with power is like crazy to me. I kind of turned into a fangirl a little bit because someone where I started to where I am at the bottom, and now I'm around all of these influential people, is just, it's crazy. And I'm trying to encourage that with other youth because it makes a lasting impact that will change their life for years.
You are no stranger to the Capitol yourself. You have advocated for a couple of bills. You have spoke to legislative staff about your life story. Talk about more about also your J-Bay advocacy, but the other work that you're doing on a volunteer basis, but putting your heart and soul in, and also in supporting legislation.
Absolutely. So I started working with John Burton Advocates for Youth in 2020. And I know when I first started, I had no idea what advocacy was. So it was definitely a journey. But once I began advocating and standing in front of hearings and sharing my story, it gave me a sense of power of bringing my story back to myself instead of other people being in control of my story in my life. And a lot of my focus has been on homelessness. So like one of the bills was AB 2416, which requires colleges to consider homelessness an extreme circumstance. And that was something that didn't really exist. I had to fight to explain I was homeless. Like, why do I have to fight and explain to you that I don't have a place to live? And another one was the youth set aside, to ensure that there was funding specifically set aside for youth, because when I was homeless, I tried adult shelters, and that was more traumatic for me. Instead, I was sleeping in cars and on couches, because being around people that were much older than me and knew how to navigate this life, and I'm 18 around complete strangers. And adult shelters, they're more equipped to manage the center. They're not case managers. They're not there to like comfort you. And that was the support that I needed at 18, because I may have been 18 and classified as an adult, but emotionally, I'm not 18 at that time. And so a lot of the advocacy, and especially when I first started, it was scary, kind of standing up to all these people in power and feeling as little as I did when I first started. And now it's turned into this amazing experience where I'm being heard.
And they need you. They need your voice. So that is self-empowering, right?
Oh, yes. And with all of the work that I've been doing at JBay and all of our champions in the state Senate and Assembly, we've got a lot of wins. Like even the last 3 years that I've been with JBay, I mean, we've been able to push so many bills through, and I can't see me doing anything else other than advocacy.
What a great thing to do. You have said before that throughout your life, there was this understandable question of why. Why is this happening to me? Coming full circle or fast forwarding to this day, is that question easier to answer for you now?
Oh, yes. It still breaks through at times when it hits me emotionally of what I've been through, all of the trauma that I try to still overcome. But all of these paths that have led me here gives me that reason why. This is why. And every youth that I encounter, every youth that I'm seeing access all of these benefits, it continues to be that reason why. Everything that I went through is, I feel more now, something I can survive. Obviously, back then, I didn't think I could survive it. There was a lot of doubt. But now I firmly believe I'm given the experiences that I can handle and nothing more than that, because now I'm seeing it full circle and affect all of the kids, all of the foster youth in the state of California.
Do you still have, as they would say, trust issues? And does somebody like Senator Ashby give you a reason to trust?
Yes, to both. So yeah, I still do encounter some trust issues. Me and my partner, we've been together 3 years, and it was hard, and it's still hard to trust him now because we got pregnant very, very fast into our relationship. So we're still learning each other, but it's hard for me to trust people because I've learned to rely on myself, and that is it. But seeing the man he's turning into and raising our daughter together, and it's teaching me to trust more, and being reconnected with my biological family. That was the first experience I had of unconditional love. I didn't know what that meant when I was a child. It was you make a mistake, and then that determines the love that you receive from your parents. But with my biological uncle who took me in when I acquainted with him several years ago, it didn't matter what mistakes I made. I could make decisions and learn from them and come back, and they were still welcoming with open arms. So my trust has gotten a lot better over the years. And even trusting myself on being able to raise my daughter and make sure she's not carrying on the characteristics that I had to learn.
And that resonates with you too, I bet, Senator, right?
Well,
as a mom?
Yeah, especially a mom of a daughter. It's really different than being a mom of sons. Your daughter watches every move you make and mimics your behavior. And you start to realize the things you say to yourself, you're teaching your daughter to say to herself. So if I tell myself in the mirror that I don't like the way I look, or I'm overly critical of myself, I am teaching her to be overly critical of herself too. If I am talking down about men, I'm teaching her to talk down about men. And so you want to be really mindful when you have a little girl that you're creating a healthy environment for her. And no matter what your environment looked like. Yeah. And by the way, I had a wonderful childhood, but I had a tough early adulthood. And so you want to parlay all of it into a victory for the people who come behind you, whether that's your own children or other people that you learn to care about. I was so happy to meet Cody. I've worked with a lot of advocates for youth in my time. In fact, I was one when I was a kid. And she's really special because she has an ability to sort of sit back and listen and hear all of the pieces, interject her own personal experience, but also leave lots of room for everybody else's personal experiences. It makes her a very strong advocate, and I think it's one of the reasons why she gets called on so often, and why when something's really important like this one, that we work with somebody like Cody.
And you are a mom. That's wonderful. You're a mom of a 2-year-old plus daughter. Talk about that experience of having a child and, wow, this is my flesh and blood. This is part of me.
It's been the greatest journey ever.
Sometimes, by the way, that sounds like this. This is a part of me, or like, oh my gosh, this is a part of me.
Yeah, the way she said it. That's the way to say it.
Both ways. It can happen both ways.
Yeah, it is. It's been incredible. And sometimes, I mean, time passes way too fast. She's going to turn 3 in May, and I wish time would just slow down. But it was hard because in the beginning, I had a lot of doubts that I was going to be a good mom, and I mean, I don't know how many therapy sessions I was in and crying because I didn't know how to change a diaper. And like a lot of the trauma was resurfacing that I was going through being pregnant and having a daughter. And I was a daughter. Like I wanted to do better, and I have been doing better. She is the happiest child. I mean, just the pure joy that comes out of her that I get to witness every day is amazing. And like it is my fundamental mission to never see that joy die in her.
That's sweet. That's sweet. Final thoughts here before we close. The way you reacted earlier, this may be the most difficult question I asked you about the future. What is ahead? Now, you told me you have 8 jobs.
I do.
God bless you. So where do you see yourself in the next 10 years moving forward? Obviously, as a leader in some capacity. What do you see for yourself?
Absolutely, definitely remaining in advocacy. It's my purpose in life, and I can't see me doing anything else other than that. But I want to stay involved with foster youth. That is where my passion is. And definitely in Sacramento. Sacramento is my soft spot. I was born and raised in Sacramento.
Yes, that's right.
So it's as long as my path remains with foster youth, I don't care what it is.
No, that's wonderful. Question just that comes to the top of my mind. Obviously, as you find some peace of mind and security, financial security and otherwise, and moving forward your life, becoming a graduate of college, getting your bachelor's degree, I know your heart is still out there for a lot of young people who are standing on your shoulders, so to speak, but are still struggling as former foster youth. And I think sometimes even in a success story like yours, there's still a lot of things hidden under the surface that you're still dealing with, obviously, and that these young people are dealing with that we need not to forget. Share with me, if you can, just what we as a society need to know and remember in changing our attitudes, removing our biases, whatever it might be, to help young foster youth, former foster youth as well.
I think it kind of coincides with the same kind of question that I ask, why, I think is important for society to also remember on if someone is behaving or triggered or talking about a certain topic in a way, there's always a reason why. And I feel it's not asked enough or really kind of viewed on why is that. It's more we jump to conclusions too quickly. And it kind of resonates with what you had said earlier of being a unique advocate and very powerful, because one of the things that I carry into the work that I do is I am one of the success stories. I got very fortunate with all the opportunities and meeting my biological family, but I'm very cautious about including that in my testimonies because representing that as foster youth is not what happens most often. We aren't having more foster youth with these success stories and graduating, and we need more of that. So I try to be very cautious on sharing that because I don't want that to be the bias that people, or the stigma that, or that's not the right word, my experience to that being the common situation that's happening with our foster youth, because it's not. And I think that's important to remember of I may be successful, but that's not what's happening on the front lines that these kids are experiencing.
Although I will say this was an interesting thing. As word got out that I was working on this bill over the last year, you might be surprised how many lobbyists, special interests, individuals, elected and non-elected, that found their way to our team to say, hey, I don't really talk about this a lot, but I was a former foster youth. Tell me what I can do to help with that bill. In all different sectors that maybe you might not think would be paying attention to this. And they were, because it was personal for them. And I just think that it's not something that people talk about a lot, but I bet if you did, you might be surprised at some of the people who are extraordinarily successful right here in Sacramento, who also fought their way through a foster care system and a lot of trauma and found themselves on the other side in a position to lead.
And that indeed may be in part why it was so successful, because it was so personal.
That's right.
To a lot of people. Well, Senator, obviously, congratulations on this bill. And one thing I think we should point out, going back to some of the statistics of the work that's already being done successfully here in California, you didn't author this bill in a vacuum. There's a history here that you are working on to get to this point with this bill, right?
Absolutely. It's like a relay race. I just got to run the final stretch. There are many people, many people who worked hard on these issues for foster youth to do well in college. And this is sort of the last lap of the college piece and making sure that it's a complete loop for young people who are former foster youth in the state of California. There's always going to be room for improvement, always ways to do more. My hope is that the funding source is used up every year, and that the big ask for me in the years to come is, can you get more money in there? Because that would mean more kids are taking advantage and using the resource. That's what we want. That's what this is about.
And so obviously this doesn't put a lid on your legislative priorities for young people, particularly foster youth.
No, it serves as a really good inspiration to me of what's possible. And like I said, it would be enough, but it is my first year, and it was a really big accomplishment to get in a first year. And I like to think of that as a bit of a catalyst for me to know that if I really put my mind to it, that there might be more that I can do to help more people before I leave this building.
Beautiful. Senator, congratulations. Thank you for the continued work and advocacy, freshman and moving forward here in the legislature.
It's an honor.
And Cody, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Wish you continued peace of mind in your journey ahead, and continued unconditional love, making up for what was not there in your life as you move ahead in the journey. So thank you for joining us and sharing your story.
Absolutely.
Well.
Thank you.
Senator Angelique Ashby from Sacramento, author of the new law SB 307, the College Foster Youth Act, and Cody Van Felden, a former foster youth, an advocate for the John Burton Advocates for Youth program, and a soon-to-be graduate from Sacramento State. And that closes this edition from There's California. We are a production of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus, with technical assistance and production support from John Roman, Ben Abaya, Brian Shadden, Michelle Baker, McLeana Woods, and the graphic talents of Tim Davis. From the state capitol here in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green. Thank you for listening to Then There's California.